fact that, once again, that same notion that was mentioned there by Frederica a moment ago, that we're actually all just people, we're all in this together. We want to be able to help each other, and it's our humanity and our common humanity that really draws us together. And I think there was strong respect in the discussion that we had of the fact that we really do want to deeply give respect to that, and not, in the discussion we found ourselves using pronouns like them and they and us, and there was very good will in the discussion to actually immediately recognise that and correct it, because it's, the language actually frames the whole thing, and we're reinforcing our stereotypes and the concerns actually in this process that we're wanting to get away from, to be able to draw, to be together as community rather than, to have this notion in our mind of differentiation. So, however, we did say, and there is a lot of writing, and I'm just going to have to quickly assimilate this, sorry, so things like valuing each other, we were concerned about the fact that there are fractured relationships. We talked a bit about some mentorship programs that are actually already running in a number of the lower SES areas, and how positive they are. The fact that they're positive both for the people who are living in that area, but also for the mentors themselves, and the kind of experiences that people are reporting is that everybody is actually becoming more positive, that there's it becomes an emotional experience, so something that actually is deeply, viscerally felt, which has the opportunity to make change in people's attitudes, and that people coming from those mentorship programs, on both parts of the mentorship program, are seeing things through different eyes. So there's learning and personal growth that's coming from that. We talked about people, and there were a couple of examples of this that were brought up, of people who working in those communities, but perhaps not having been part of that community or through their lives, making conscious and intentional decisions to go and live in the community that they're working with in order to be deeply engaged with it and to have sustained relationships inside of that community. That was one of the other things we talked about. I mentioned fractured relationships earlier. We saw one of the salves against the fracturing of relationships as the willingness to actually continue in relationship, and that our humanity really is the driver of that, because when we find the things in other people who are different to ourselves, we find the sweet things, then those are that's the point of connection. We talked a little bit about the fact we're all fellow citizens of Tasmania. I should do this in order really, shouldn't I? Okay, let me just do it. So raising awareness, valuing people, not being patronising, not being prescriptive in the kinds of programs and the activities that we would want to, anybody would want to share and have take place. Asking the question, what would you like to have happen? Sharing stories, being aware of all judgments. It's not a one-way bridge. Asking and talking about and sharing a discussion what different communities value about themselves, what it is to be human, creating through that a bridge for dialogue. We talked about the challenges in housing and the planning of housing situations, as we have it set out here in some parts of Tasmania. And the why we would want to change these. One of the points that was made is that actually we're all going to be forced over the next couple of decades to change our living in any case, and that actually it makes a whole bunch of sense to help each other change as a whole community. We talked about security and crime, recognising that there are some challenging issues arising in those areas, and that that's something that is worthy of giving support to, and sharing in those, finding those solutions to give for more equitable stake in the future to all parties, creation of a sense of belonging. And we actually found ourselves, and it was Diana, she is, who talked about being held. So to create a sense of belonging, and in that meaning in the very human sense of belonging and being held in our humanity. But then we did kind of venture on to use the word love in that space as well. And I think that what we were talking about was really more than just a positive regard for other, but that actually what really drives us to do well in this space is a love of our fellow human beings. To touch on possibilities that those who are more advantaged take for granted, that vision is allowable, and that if people have been in a situation where they have had a robbing of their opportunity to have a vision beyond what is immediately around them and what they know through their circumstances, through no fault of their own, and there's perhaps not an understanding that they have choice and can have vision. And so giving and supporting and sharing the message that vision is allowable. We also talked about modelling ways of living, but doing that in a shoulder-to-shoulder way, not to do that in a patronising way. Integration, finding out what communities want, not at all going in and being prescriptive. Finding those people who are the natural change agents within communities, because all communities have people who are drivers of change. I also mentioned, because I've read this guy, a guy called Robert Putnam, who has a website that has a lot of ideas on it for the things that we can actually do in our own communities that don't even cost any money, they just take a bit of our time and a bit of intention. He's got a long list of ideas of things that you and I can go away tonight, and start actually doing to build community where we live. We talked about living our own values and sharing those with others. Discipling was a word that was used, and what was meant by that was that if we're sharing with others the way that we live, and they're sharing with us the way that they live, and their attitudes and values, and there's a sharing of that, then the discipling process is one that values that sharing and that holds it and teaches and walks together. So it's not a teaching in a didactic way, but in a way that is walking together. Do you want to add anything to that, Rich?
Just that stops the fracturing, that you can pass on that to someone else and they pass it on to the community, so that it doesn't get fractured.
Yeah. And then there was the idea of extending that, or actually really embedded in it, of pay it forward. So, you know, the good that we might receive, that we are willing to pay that on to others. And that this little phrase that I know and use about iron sharpening iron. And so when you rub two pieces of iron together, they both get sharp. And the idea of sharing our differences, because it is really positive for all of us to do so. Have I covered that? Okay, that's it.
Thank you.